Welcome to Dark Dreams.
I say every house in America should have an electric chair. And every man just once in his life should sit in it, just so that he can feel the power of millions of gallons of electricity flow through his veins. I got an electric chair, that's all I need. You get an electric chair, Sheldon, you don't have to worry about the audience. You get an electric chair, you can tell them anything you want, as long as it's real. You get yourself an electric chair and they'll sit there all night long. Kind of a funny idea, sitting in an electric chair and doing a show. Well, think of the therapeutic value of an electric chair and all the money it is. Yes, an electric chair in every home.
The Electric Chair, a show about horror. ElectricChairShow.com.
An electric chair. Wow.
The Diary of Hilltop Manor, Just Desserts, by Nathan Jonathan David Lee Rowark.
It felt like I had become part of its story when discovering a torn book stuffed away behind cooking manuals and magazines. What was waiting for me on that pasting table, doubled up for a yard sale, was something far more intriguing than a commuter's page-turner. A written account of a madman's turn at the infamous Hilltop Manor. I'd never heard of the place until then. Although it was local, the residents' disdain had somehow set it apart. Once a prestigious address, Hilltop Manor had been an asylum, hospital, the list was endless. It seemed it would take on almost any guise for its survival and others' entrapment. The old woman overseeing the stall was kind enough to let me take away such malignancy from her well-cut lawn and pristine doorstep. Grateful, almost. She had a fragile innocence about her to begin with, yet there lurked a Faustian traitor beneath those dark, tired eyes. I never found out why she had it. I never had the chance to ask her. I bought the hidden book and left, handing over the few pence that lay deep within my pocket. After a week of reading its cryptic tales, I returned to the little suburb dwelling to find it empty and abandoned. I felt like she had only hung on long enough to pass it over, this notebook for the damned. After studying such historic misery, you begin to imagine many things. And, as it would turn out, oftentimes that's part of the problem. I'm a rational man, and know the difference between what's real and what's not, yet how much would 5 senses allow when finding myself dealing with this diary, the very definition of purgatory? Alone in my empty apartment, I began to flick through its random scrawls, which brought me face to face with its eldest resident, a cook with a cleaver to grind. The creep that crept below the hall, inside the sewer, on urine's squall, stalks the sights it once had fell, strolls the trail of those unwell, digs the trench beneath the life of lives above that tortured rife, a shadowed soul that under sits for lighter lineage that fits. In the larder soiled goods like those once stolen from the woods, birds a family sought to borrow, covered by store-hand sorrow, never forgot the ingredients blended, to now avenge a time quick ended, cooks with cauldron in the kitchen, adds a spice for sour depiction. They never had their conscience pricked, looking to this right arm kicked, ever faithful put to test, when hiding crime at their behest, once saved the face of family line to end upon a thief tree's twine, now fluffs the pillows right to keep, until guilty lose their flight for sleep. They wonder on misfortunes wrought, why an echo surrounds this plot, negative a minus hurt now floods this future coordinate. Fleeing from a house ill-soaked, on a well of blood in throat he choked, and was all this presence had to float, such twisted heart to drown their boat. He follows coffins just to savor the pain avenged to win their favor, no longer scapegoat laugh of many, but ferrymen to place their penny. Chooses heads from older tales to reside with him amongst the whales. Companions struck by sudden death are angered so as not to rest. The house now moans with lives he took, woman and child for now forced to cook. Insidious dish waits for she that moves to land beneath his tree. Child arms are soon branch hung, that branch held fast as old friends swung. The line to come he'd once defend, now scullery shall prove to end. As I digested this last line, my microwave dinner had somewhat turned inside my stomach. I threw the book down in disgust and began trawling the online archives for any basis to such events. To my horror, I found just that. Indeed, there had been a family who had passed away through food poisoning, several, in fact, residing at that same address. Stomach ulcers and the like had been attributed misadventure, gas stove poisoning. The list was exhaustive, and now residing there, the next in line to the estate. After considerable time in the States, Miss Creighton and her son Lydon uncomfortably sat on this tainted throne. This document, however, seemed to contain many other short, sharp shocks on those who had supposedly driven 1950s billionaire Tony Franks to insanity, to end up imprisoned in the very home he was afraid of years later. As I read this versed account, validated by my own feelings, together with the writings of Frank's terrible volume, I could only apologize in mind to anyone who would read my notes in the future. I should never have divulged such events. The dusk was drawing in, and I found myself drawn to read on. I settled on page 36. The heading set a seafaring tone, and had me praying for the dawn. Sipping beer for a hot summer save that infatuated the sails with the burning wind's wave, we crossed the Pacific for a new world unseen, least by my stolen eyes seemed all but a dream. Day slipped away and allowed for the dusk, for the traveling show of a passenger's husk, our lives all but set as the sky now arrived, a velvet flood, black our light ocean dived. For those who could stand and arrive without fall, a meeting was called in the ship captain's pool. I sensed we weren't there for a geriatric feast. Corner eye porthole identified the beast. "I'm afraid the news is bad," our captain gravely uttered, gruffly between his fingers, his syntax rare and shuddered. "This vessel that we stand upon, our feet free from the shore, is quickly being followed by an eel, yet much more. Our radar puts size off the charts, our records clearly show those years before our years advanced on another boat in flow. Their story put them round this position on the map, an ancient clipper followed by such creature from the black. Our sails just won't compensate for an engine's pull-in gear. I am right now uncertain if from Jurassic Pike we'll steer. We'll have a plan in motion to shut off noise and glare, like submarine on silent, to appear, to disappear. The eel has poor vision that our action should impair. Born within darkness, it is not so sight-aware. Head back to your cabins and prepare your lives to dim, for we're not quite yet extinguished by a fish upon a whim. I fell unsettled under cover with an electric blanket's hum, to unplug so as not to agitate a vengeful monster's son. I too knew sorry story of a ship upon a wave, falling under fearful terror of a shadow's night to save. The souls transporting goods that slipped to highest lands abound, vanished from their ghost boat, its records only found. Desert island disk of compass smashed into the rock, a pointing, pointless needle protruding from its box. Fate now seemed a mirror, a past not had its fill, but we were much too old and wise to swig such bitter pill. A line of chairs appeared along the decking, clutching spears fashioned from the bunk beds, and defense before our fears. Able-bodied, ably mixed a spirit's brew, the bar now bar bomb factory, to belly's end they slew. Our passing that same evening was timely, even right, yet beneath our worn exteriors bore an urgent need to fight. Wars in every pestilence were worn beneath each belt, so one last scaly tidal bout could not hurt, it was felt. The crew stood still as motionless, with sails removed we sat. Leviathan come diner snaked beside us, sleek and flat. Then it rose into the sky with jaws outstretched for bite, a morsel that with swollen mouth it could not reach for height. As makeshift pikes pierced angry gums from those with unsure aim, that shaking hands and blurry eyes were not this time to blame. Gaping molars took their toll on bravest deck chair lot, who had not substituted ice cream for everything they got. Those not so leg deficient were next to fight within this heat, to cause a spirited surrender through alcoholic flame defeat. It took container easily, the fuse already lit, the bar now shut, closing time by a Molotov cavern hit. Still not enough, the hole it blew took in the water slow, and did not deter the appetite of a veteran vessel's foe. A final thought, the ship's supplies were hurried overboard to appease an angry sea god with our pharmacy-led horde. Cocktail of fresh meat with enough drugs to stun its bite, in hopes to send this thing lucid whilst we scurried for the light. Feeding through the midnight hours seemed to keep at bay the horror at our bowels, so our bony bodies not to slay. The dawn we knew was coming, yet had no sense of time, as we domesticated Nessie with our finest foods to dine. When all was out, our masts adorned, the crawl across the sea was not fast enough, this dawn treader within its right to flee. So Captain made a sacrifice for mouths aboard still breathing. He walked a plank of volition, with coercion from those seething. You brought us on this journey knowing danger lurked in tow. Extend the stretch for criminal, it's time for him to go. Knowledge told you waters were a danger to our end, so dive into the drink, and on our way this ship you'll send. Seafaring face was terrified, outnumbered by our age, combined score of 1,000 held majority to gauge. A step off bark to face the liquid swirling undertook, was classed as man's acceptance of a doomed soul on the hook. Retracted board and officer would fight against the tide, luminous the lifeboat throne, attracting snake to guide, proving to be snack enough for elongated life. Our prehistoric lead hysteria deprived a land-bound wife. Horizon's beam signifying an ending of our part, to the sunlight blinkered dinosaur and the biting pain in heart. The cost of saving scaly skin, our appetite for life, had devoured trite morality, rescue out of sight. Floating larder empty, our bellies feeling bare, an alternate new food source we then found to water fare. It wasn't quite ideal, a little tough for Dentra's crunch, yet containing 5 a day demands became such a hearty lunch. So as we warmed our blanket toes on radio wave for days, awaiting Coast Guard savior to breach the daylight haze, the cabin crew were gracious and would serve our every whim, a group of long, slim eels, now with taste for her or him. This time I really did feel sick. So Tony Franks had been on the supposed retirement cruise, finding himself face to face with a prehistoric monster? It couldn't be true, or maybe it was, and eating those poor people long enough to survive and be rescued had sent him over the edge. Even so, I had to remember that not all I would read within this book could be anywhere near attributed as fact. When I turned my face to my alarm clock, I found it was just 2 a.m. The accounts I'd read recently came scurrying back to me like hungry bugs scuttling to feast on my now cautious cortex. And there he sat, Mr. Franks, on the neatly folded corner of my bedspread, as if still full of life and death. I grabbed his curled page exterior and headed downstairs, bumbling form projecting along the staircase like some animated cave painting, a shadow of my own evolutionary cul-de-sac. I needed to track down the contact details of Miss Creighton fast. As my laptop began to spring to life from its power nap, a diabolical entry on Larry Franks found my finger and wedged it firmly between its pincer parts. I hadn't even had my breakfast yet, but it seemed my journey into the mind of a rich recluse and his haunted testimonies would continue in earnest. Or was the manor simply trying to distract my attention? Musing in the corner on imaginative lead play sits a new friend, Mr. Booface, in his silly-looking way. Face is all lopsided, bones clicked from their joints. He joined me from my battle start and never disappoints. He sees my pile of soldiers and helps put them in a row, so that almost quite immediately the two sides become foe. When dinner time is called, my mother serves an extra place for the invisible invited, who to the table I must race. In bedroom when lights go out and I'm left on my own, it's Boofface, my contorted featurette, that sets the tone. The boogeyman awaits whilst under cover we defend. He sends the notion scurrying, my dark-sided special friend. Not even fabled Sandman would challenge for the ride, companion where my fears in broken head sits to reside. Beneath the clown exterior, a seriousness develops, a deeper, smarter, darker, that eventually envelops. As teenager, I found our goals conflicted by my life. Another girlfriend ran screaming, who could have been a wife. I left her in my bedroom while I poured us both a drink, but old Blueface won't have company whilst I'm at kitchen sink. Relationships were tricky, there weren't many friends to call due to ailment and mirror, holding confidence to fall. But Blueface never judged me on appearance shown external. We'd laugh at fake detractors in our picturesque infernal. Later we found solitude invited in a hurry. My parents showed no gratitude by expressions shown to worry. I thought you'd be happy. I don't participate in drugs, and I don't hang out underage with similar-aged thugs. It's time Blueface was leaving, came reply from heavy heads. A psychiatrist will help your mind alleviate him with meds. He's far outstayed his welcome. Another child must await. Say your long goodbye, and with the doctors seal his fate. A friend to execution to take those steps away. That wasn't what he wanted, and I wanted him to stay. So that night we thought of other ways to consummate our union, pact of foul-flung murder on those to threaten our seclusion. They never woke from tea I poured on breakfast doomed to flay, ungrateful since no respite they'd received since first wrong day. No more bound to rearrange their schedules or pay fees. No more hospital appointments our bone structure kids would tease. With boiling liquid poison I'd showed kindness without measure. To rest in peace those restless boo few no longer to's endeavor. Phone in hand, gingerly I called the magic number. Forever to seal future, whilst friend waves their soul asunder. My phantom alter ego now comforts me in cell. As we ponder choices many, my mind trapped within his spell. Together like our soldiers, side by side, always at war. Old Blueface, child killer, whom through murderous eyes world saw. My innards were twisting with the bitter tasting stories of these delectable denizens. I began to give way, falling to my knees and unable to breathe. No more fighting. It was coming up and fast, my nausea spilling over the blemished carpet, fluid and green, soaking through its fabric and down into the cracks beneath the floorboards. What's more, it kept on coming, burning acids of a bowel unable to cope, mingling with the undigested tales that had been forced on me as an appetizer. Struggling to the kitchen, the paper towels were in sight, hanging from the dispenser on the other side of the room, just 2 inches clear of my fingertips. It taunted me in my soiled white shirt, imperfections illuminated by the sickly stained glow of the lounge's failing bulb. I raised my arm for the light switch. After a few swipes I found it, but I needed to switch it down. No good. Then the shaking started, beneath the smooth lino and along the counters. The jars and containers fell like dominoes with the tremors caused by an uninvited guest. I braved the tumbling receptacles, whilst swerving falling shards of jagged glass. Almost there. Just needed to negotiate the shadows of too many elongated appliances to creep up on the vibration source. Maybe it was a broken pipe. I already knew it wasn't. Couldn't be. The plumbing was just checked a few months prior to me moving in. Stomach pains were getting worse now, stabbing and unrelenting. Its lining felt like it was blistering from the very pit. Leaning against the sideboard, it dawned on me that I wasn't going to make it. The phone sat out in the hallway, out of reach. At that moment, all I could think of was poor Miss Clayton. I hoped she would figure out the truth about her family heirloom by herself, before it was too late. A figure removed himself from behind the large refrigerator humming in the corner that I never had enough company to fill. I'd already noticed the back door had been left slightly ajar, moonlight peeking through the gap. I knew who was standing there. He needn't have bothered to hide. So he'd tainted my meals too, just like he had slipped all those other jailbirds a thing or two in their daily slush. Just desserts. It's amazing who they'll appoint to be head chef in prisons these days. I'd been free a month now, conviction for insurance fraud quashed. I'd sold insurance to cruise ship holidaymakers, the retiring rich. They left most, well, more naked than secure. It was an easy way to make a living if you knew the right contacts. Mine were bent, and secretly carrying out investigation into my activities. Still, I'd done my time. Somebody hadn't thought so. Had been changing my diet for months. By the time I was due to leave stir, half the inmates had been taken mysteriously ill. The guards figured that Tony Frank's nephew, Larry, was up to no good again and put him in the much plusher, minimum security wing for counseling, on account of him using the prison cleaning products to spice up the menu. More than that, I think that they did it simply to protect the other cons, and so they wouldn't have to stare at Boo Face every day. Larry just couldn't stay away from that kitchen. He said he did it out of twisted kindness so that the inmates wouldn't have to glare at his contorted face anymore. Someone of Larry's split persuasion would have found it easy to trick the system, to make them take pity on him for a temporary release. That still didn't explain the noises below my kitchen, the shaking and the moans, unless Larry had an accomplice in his murder game. A figure that had led a fearsome gang of not 2, but 3 evil killers. He had visited Hilltop Manor often as a child? No. Oh, sweet God, no! My last moments are in darkness. The book is left carefully on the lounge table as my body is folded beneath the floorboards, for another to drag along its narrow pathway. All I can faintly hear is the sound of my own nails scraping along the concrete foundations, buckling under the speed of a black, dark-hearted shape giggling in earnest. What a blessed release, I think, as I drift away. I'm word food now. I served my time.
Thank you.